Welcome, action fans, and thanks for joining me for another edition of All 90s Action All the Time. As we continue this year's journey looking at the action cinema of 1994. I'm your host, Scott Murphy, and today we are looking at not only one of the most acclaimed action movies of 1994, but one of the most acclaimed action movies of the 90s and probably all time. As today we're talking about Speed. Alongside me to talk about this one, we have a very special guest in the form of Ramblin and Amblin Podcast co-host Andrew Gaudion. I hope I got that okay. The surname.
Yeah, perfect. I've heard many a butchering of that surname over my years, so it's nice to hear it come out straight out the gate perfectly fine. I always quite like saying I could do because it's got French origins, so I've very much anglicized it to Gaudion, but if I really wanted to go properly posh with it, I could go it's Andrew Gaudion.
That's how I initially was pronouncing it in my head, but I was like, oh, maybe that's wrong. So
I think if I ever become a film director, I'll become Andrew Gaudion.
Absolutely. So before I go into the production notes and the stats about the film, just tell us a little bit about Ramblin and Amblin Podcast, its origins, and what you're doing over there.
Absolutely. So for those who may not be too familiar with what Amblin is, that's the production company that Steven Spielberg started in the early 80s with Frank Marshall and Kathleen Kennedy. So they're the house behind a lot of Spielberg hits and a lot of Spielberg adjacent hits. So we're talking E.T., Back to the Future, The Goonies, Mask of Zorro, Men in Black, Small Soldiers. The list goes on and on. All the Jurassic Park films. So it's very much it was very much a lockdown project that it started as I'm sure many podcasts did. But me and my co-host, my good friend Josh Glenn, had been talking for years about doing something like a podcast together. And we were just sat there going oh, Amblin Cropper films is quite good. That would be quite fun to go through. And we're like, someone's probably already done that. And then we do a little bit of research and we're like, oh, no one's done it. We should do it. So there it was born. And I think the main thing that we're very proud about is that it's still going. We're still going strong. We're in the early noughties now. We've just done our episode on Men in Black 2. But yeah, basically we just get friends and fellow film critics and podcasters on to discuss the movies in chronological order and unpack just what makes an Amblin movie an Amblin movie, and why all these, because we've always found particularly the earlier days of Amblin are these films that really typify what you think of as a Hollywood blockbuster, or are really quite foundational text for people. So people always have quite strong feelings about both the movies and Spielberg and his many mentees work across the years. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun, and we've still got plenty more to get through.
All right, yeah, and I would definitely recommend our listeners to check your podcast out. And I also listened to I was listening to your latest episode on Men in Black 2, and I must compliment you on your rendition of Black Suit coming brackets nod your head. I thought that was really great.
Thank you very much. I had a great time playing that song multiple times in that episode, but I'm not too sure Josh was too keen on it, but I had fun.
I got that impression. I got that impression. I enjoyed it. I think it's one of Will Smith's best songs, I have to say.
I'm 100% with you. Clearly.
All right, pop quiz. Airport. Gunman with one hostage. He's using her for cover. He's almost to a plane. You're 100 feet away.
What do you think? Shoot the hostage.
What?
Go for the good wound and he can't get to the plane with her. Clear shot.
You're deeply nuts, you know that?
All right, gentlemen, what we have here are 13 passengers in an express elevator. Bomb's already taken out cables. Bomber wants $3 million or he blows the emergency brakes.
Anything else that'll keep this elevator from falling?
basement.
He can strike anywhere, at any time.
Will the mystery guest please sign in?
Why are they messing with me? Do they think I'm doing this for fun?
For L.A. cop Jack Traven,
Tell me again, Harry, why did I take this job?
Come on, 30 more years of this, you get a tiny pension and a cheap gold watch.
Cool.
the game began.
Very exciting, Jack. Some close calls, huh?
When someone put the city of Los Angeles to the ultimate test.
Pop quiz, hotshot. There's a bomb on a bus. Once the bus goes 50 miles an hour, the bomb is armed. If it drops below 50, it blows up. What do you do? What do you do?
Now,
Are you insured? Yeah, why?
he's the only solution.
We just got a ransom demand from your terrorist. Says he's rigged the city bus. Where's Jack?
Where do you think?
Stay on or get off.
Get off.
This is much better.
Everybody hold on!
Keanu Reeves, Dennis Hopper, Sandra Bullock.
Pop quiz. You have a hair trigger aimed at your head. What do you do? What do you do?
Speed. Get ready for rush hour.
Speed was released on June 10th, 1994. It was directed by Jan de Bont, who has a few director's credits. Probably his most notable other movie is Twister. But he's
Yeah, an
probably-
Amblin joint.
Yeah, absolutely. He's possibly more known for being a cinematographer on the likes of Die Hard, Black Rain, The Hunt for the Red October, Lethal Weapon 3, and a number of Paul Verhoeven movies. It was written by Graham Yost, who wrote a couple other 90s action films in Broken Arrow and Hard Rain, but is probably best known now for being the showrunner and creator of Justified. It had a number of uncredited rewrites as well, mainly focusing on dialogue, by somewhat unheard of screenwriter Joss Whedon. It also picked up a couple of Oscar nominations. Very rare for this podcast to talk about Oscar nominations, but it did. For film editing, sound and sound effect editing, and it won the latter too. It also won Best Film Editing and Best Sound at BAFTAs that year. Critically, it is currently sitting on a 95% on Rotten Tomatoes based on 73 reviews, 78 on Metacritic based on 17 reviews. It has a 7.3 out of 10 on IMDb, a 3.7 on Letterboxd, and
Come on, boys.
lastly, box office wise, it made a whopping $350.4 million off of a budget estimated to be between 30 and 37 million, making it
Big hit.
Yeah, huge hit, very profitable, nearly 10 times its budget, or more than 10 times its budget, depending on what the budget actually was. Making it the sixth biggest film of 1994, placing it just one higher than the Jim Carrey comedy Dumb and Dumber, and just one lower than the Jim Carrey comedy The Mask.
1994 is the year known as the Jim Carrey year.
Yes, because Ace Ventura was also in the top 25.
That's right.
So,
He had like Ace Ventura out in the February, The Mask out in the summer, and then Dumb and Dumber out around Christmas. I mean, if you didn't like Jim Carrey, you were stuck with him for constantly in the multiplex that year. Thankfully, I'm a big fan.
I was a big fan as well. I remember the Mask is one of the. I think it was like only like I didn't go to the cinema that much when I was a kid. And the Mask was only like my second cinema trip, or something like that. Yeah, But yeah, I was a big fan of Jim Carrey, and I enjoyed all of those films, despite the fact that, like, in retrospect, Ace Ventura has a terrible ending.
Particularly
Um,
Ace Ventura.
yeah.
Ugh, it's icky looking back on that.
Yeah, it's so disappointing because it's generally still quite a funny comedy, but there's just certain elements,
Yeah.
and that ending is just fucking awful. Ah, dear, oh dear. But yes, moving away from Jim Carrey's uber successful year, probably one of the most successful years anybody's ever had in movies.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So Speed.
Mm.
So yeah, why did you want to come on to this for this one? And tell us a little bit about what relationship you might have to the film, first time you saw it, memories you have.
Absolutely. So I think mainly when you sent over that list of the 94 films, and also what a good year for action movies is 94.
It's very much, yes, it's very much like a peak
Yeah.
year for action cinema.
Because I think like another movie that must have been in the top 10 grosses for this year is True Lies, and I might bring that back up yesterday because it makes a very fascinating comparison, those two films. Speed coming in at the relatively modest $30 million budget, and then True Lies being the most expensive film made up to that point. With two very different style of action star. But I think main reason Speed and this podcast as well is that along with being like a Spielberg nut and generally a like Hollywood movie nut, I'm a big action movie guy as well. It's very much a genre that the highs and lows of it, I'll consume it all. It just ticks a lot of boxes. It presses the right buttons for me. A lot of my heroes growing up were like Stallone and Schwarzenegger in particular. But I remember seeing Speed for the first time when I was quite young. I want to say I was about 9 years old. It was on TV, and I'd clocked it in the Radio Times. I was like, this movie about a bust it. Can't slow down. Interesting. That's Keanu Reeves. I like that guy. He's funny in his Bill and Ted movies. And I asked my dad about it, and he's like, oh yeah, that's a fun movie. It's like, can I see it? Because I clocked like, oh, that's a 15. I wonder if they'll let me watch it. Because particularly before I was like, it seemed to be a threshold after I was 11. My parents just seemed to be like, you can watch whatever you want. Because I think they got from quite early on that I very much had a good distinction of like, this is just a movie, and I wasn't ever really that rattled by anything. But before like that age of 11, they were still a bit strict on what sort of movies I could see. So I was a little unsure whether I could watch Speed, but they were both quite like, yeah, I mean, I can't remember anything being that bad in Speed. So my dad recorded it that night. It was on TV, and I had that VHS recorded off BBC One evening for quite a long time. And like, it's one of those ones that still to this day I hold up as kind of like a Mount Rushmore action movie, and it's one I've revisited a lot over the over 20 years old on now that I've watched it for the first time, just because it is that kind of platonic ideal of what these kind of movies can do. High concept, good characters, good humor, good wit, good sequences, good actors, just like having a ball. And I think it was, and I think from seeing it from that early age, because when you do look at it as a whole, there's not much. It's not that bloody. There's the odd effing and jeffing. But for the most part, it is pretty. It's pretty you friendly, I would say. There's nothing too extreme in this. It's just a really thrilling, good time that I think a lot of people, particularly even people, I always find this with Speed, even people who don't really like action movies still like Speed.
Yeah, I can get that because yeah, I guess it's not, it doesn't, I mean, like you say, it kind of is what you were saying about the platonic ideal of an action movie, but I guess it's not the same as some other action movies, like in the way that, like, if people are put off by like the goriness of certain action
Yeah.
movies, or if people are put off by the kind of, I don't know, like the kind of sleaziness of certain
Yeah,
action movies,
absolutely.
or whatever. Because like one of the things I found like while rewatching it, which was actually quite refreshing, is often we have to kind of parse things out on this podcast and say like this movie is great, but there's certain elements that haven't
Yeah,
aged well.
time has not been
you
kind,
know,
sort of
there's
thing.
certain things that might be a bit sexist or a bit homophobic,
Yeah.
or like whatever it is. Where there's nothing really problematic here. Nothing really stood out as kind of like
it's pretty clean cut.
Yeah, everything's pretty clean cut. So like it's aged perfectly. I don't think even a kind of younger viewer going back to this will look at it and be like, kind of turn their nose up and be like, well, that bit's pretty ugly, like there's there's nothing here. I mean, I guess like some of the characters are a bit generic, like Captain McMahon's the kind of generic kind of police captain, although less angry than like a lot of action movie police captains.
Yeah. They'll go for a beer together after a job well done.
Yeah, he's definitely not a Bill Duke type, no. For sure. Yeah, and I like the point you brought up about True Lies as well, because not only is 1994 just a classic year for action cinema, we're going to cover quite a number of the classics. We've got we've got Leon, we've got The Crow, we've got True Lies, all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of great action movies that came out this year. But also, it does feel like a real crossroads in the kind of action movie genre of like, this is really the Schwarzenegger, Stallone era coming to a close. It kind of, the process of it started with Die Hard, with the more everyman action hero, and Speed really feels like the final nail in the coffin for like the kind of old 80s action, and we're really moving on to something else.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. And I like, a big part of that is in your casting of Keanu Reeves, and even like his career as a whole. It's a fascinating point because I always find like Keanu Reeves one of those stars who like always seems to go through ebbs and flows of being like kind of peak fame, then a couple of duds just seems to drive him down again. And this comes at a really kind of one of these quite tumultuous times for him in the 90s, and him being so synonymous with action movies now is easy to forget that it took a while for him to kind of go into this action mode, because yes, he had Point Break, but that's his first action movie, and this is really his second. And it's hard for him to get out of that Bill and Ted mold for a while, I think. And while Point Break does start shifting it and is great, and he's still not fully out of the kind of Bill and Ted mode, because that same year is when Bogus Journey comes out. I think he also had My Own Private Idaho that year in 92 even, I think, which is a cracking year for Keanu Reeves. That's like the three flavors of like the three best flavors of Keanu Reeves right there. But then like,
no, I think you're right the first time. I think it is 91.
Right. Yes, because it would have been the same summer as T2, wouldn't it? And and then then that straight after that year, he has he puts in two performances over the next couple of years that are still often regarded as two of his worst in Dracula and Much Ado About Nothing. Again, I'm not really sure that either of them are really his fault. I just think he's terribly miscast in them. So, and then Speed comes at a point where it's like, okay, what's going to be my thing now? What the kind of character actor for auteurs hasn't really worked out for me. That action, I enjoyed doing that action movie. Let's find something similar to that. And he feel that Jack Traven feels like a very natural evolution of the kind of more still like quite like cocky, cocksure Johnny Utah that you see at the start of Point Break, and turning into this more earnest, still slightly wild card, running on instinct law enforcer. But it's a nice natural evolution for him. And I think even looking at the way he is in both movies is an interesting transition over that 3-year period or whatever it is. where even in like Point Break, he still looks like still looks like he is in Bill and Ted, and still kind of has that surfer whoa sort of thing going on. And he's like still he's not that imposing to look at. He's quite lean, he's quite lithe. And then here he's got close to a buzz cut, and he's been working out, he's gotten thicker, he looks stronger, he looks broader. And it's this, I think, just a fascinating turn for him to make. And for it to be a hit, I think is, again, coming into a high point for Keanu Reeves. But again, it kind of comes down, crashing down again the next year where he does Johnny Mnemonic.
I know what you
comes
mean.
back up again in The Matrix. It's a fascinating career trajectory that man has.
He does have real ups and downs, because like you say, you know, he has this massive hit with Speed, and then he has a couple of duds in Johnny Mnemonic and like Chain Reaction.
Chain Reaction, yeah.
You know, and then he comes back with The Matrix, and like, yeah, it seems like his whole career has kind of been up and down like that. I mean,
Yeah.
because you wouldn't think it now because everybody loves Keanu now, but like right before the John Wick movies, and like, you know, that came out 2014, and like Keanu was on a downward skid.
Yeah, I mean, that was like 47 Ronin time, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of people thought like, oh, he might like dip into like kind of DTV action, you know, because a lot of people were doing that at the time, and then he got John Wick. That almost feels like a higher budget DTV action, the first one.
Yeah,
and then that just like exploded him again, and you know, he was back on top again, and now, you know, with the John Wick franchise, he seems bulletproof now, you know, like he's absolutely on top. So it's
you can never write him off.
No, you can never write him off. No, there's always just a comeback just around the corner. And I feel like there's a number of action stars kind of like that. Stallone's had a career like that, where it's been a lot of kind of boom and bust right from the very beginning of his career as well.
Yeah, totally. And just to like just further emphasize that point, even like the way he looks in The Matrix is then so different to how he looks even in this. He's a fascinating actor in that, like, he gives performances which are seemingly quite simple. He's not really doing a lot, but then like the physicality of him is always so interesting to watch. He's always quite cool and calm and quite collected, particularly in Speed. He just feels like someone who's very in control, and I really like. He's so watchable in this film for very different reasons to say why he's quite watchable in Point Break, because he's still quite pretty in Point Break, and whilst he's still clearly a very handsome man in this movie, there's a different energy going on. He's a fascinating actor.
Yeah, for sure. And I would say it is interesting, that Point Break comparison, because when you think about it, he seems, like you say, he's kind of filled out. He's obviously worked out a lot for this movie, and Jan de Bont apparently had to kind of twist his arm, you know, to star in this movie, and he said, "I'm not really an action star," and you know, Jan de Bont really wanted him in this film, and then he, you know, worked out for the part, and that's why he looks the way he does in this movie. But he has like a whole different vibe. He seems so much more grown up and mature in this movie, and much more of an adult in this movie. And it's only been 3 years between, you know, Point Break and this, but it seems like there's just a way bigger gap than that.
Absolutely. And it even like, do you think that same year Point Break comes out is also the same year that like the second Bill and Ted comes out? It's quite a transformation for him. It's a good coming of age movie for him. Speed.
Absolutely. And I do wonder, like, I think the casting is key here, because and we'll get into the rest of the cast in a minute. Obviously, you know, we talked about Keanu as Jack, and then we've got Sandra Bullock as Annie, and like I mean, some of the alternative casting is wild.
Would be very
So
different movies.
very, very different movies. So originally, this script, this project was with Paramount, and when it was at Paramount, apparently their guy that they were was going to be their first choice was flash in the pan action star Jeff Speakman, who many will not remember, but like is a kind of karate guy, and he had a couple of movies that didn't go very far. But at one stage, I did because I recently watched one of his movies, The Perfect Weapon, and I saw an article, like it was an old article from the LA Times in the early '90s, which said that he was going to be the next Bruce Lee, which that didn't happen.
Didn't quite pan out that.
Didn't quite pan out. I always wonder like what the writers of these articles must feel like. It's like there was that famous, I think it was a Time magazine cover where they dubbed M. Night Shyamalan the next Spielberg, and
Yeah.
that didn't age well either. Like,
Just to be that guy's out and putting all my chips on this guy.
this is going to
Putting
happen,
all my
man.
chips on that karate guy from Chicago.
But the casting, the weirdness of the casting doesn't stop there, because as the project moved from Paramount to 20th Century Fox, apparently Fox's first choice for this, and I mean, I guess it's a sign of the times. I guess he was bigger back then. Stephen Baldwin.
That's never a good choice.
Which I was like, really, Stephen Baldwin?
Trying to think what he's doing in the early 90s, because like I know he's in like in the late 80s. He's in like Born on the 4th of July, but I can't think what like his early 90s was. Doesn't strike me as an action guy.
He doesn't particularly. I mean, like, I don't know. No, actually, I really don't know what was happening with Stephen Baldwin. Because, like you, I kind of aware of like late 80s, and then there's like a blank, and then there's Usual Suspects, and then
yeah,
pretty much his career. It's a bit harsh, but like
yeah, not wrong.
Weird, and then like the casting of Annie was going to be different as well, because it went through a few different iterations. So originally, Annie was going to be a black paramedic, and the first choice for that was Halle Berry. But then when she turned it down, the character was retooled and wasn't going to be a love interest, was going to be a comedy sidekick, and it was going to be played by, their thought was that it would be Ellen DeGeneres. And then it got retooled again to be like a love interest character, and that's how Sandra Bullock ended up getting the part in the end.
Very glad we don't live in the Ellen universe of this movie. Because Sandra Bullock's the type of actress as well who can like bring both that energy as like a very wiry comic relief and a genuine sparking chemistry for love interest.
Yeah,
they're both so cute in this movie.
they are. They're absolutely. And I think like if anybody's like, I think that Sandra Bullock kind of got trapped in that kind of that romantic comedy kind of black hole. And I think like maybe if people are just kind of familiar with that and it's like her not so good movies, like they should really go back to because like I think movies like this really remind you of like why she became a star, because like she kind of steals the movie. And like as in a previous episode we discussed how she absolutely steals Demolition Man. She's great in that movie, and she's great here too. And I think like these are the kind of performances you were like, oh yeah, well, this is why you became famous. You are absolutely great in this and absolutely adorable, like you said as well.
Yeah, I think like speaks to. I think Jan de Bont had a good eye here, kind of sticking to his guns, particularly with like Reeves and Bullock once they were kind of on there. I think like it's one of those ones that when you do think back on it retrospectively, it's very hard to see two other people doing these parts, and like even seeing like some of the other names for Jack that were initially like banded around, from like your Stephen Baldwins to Tom Hanks, Wesley Snipes, and Tom Cruise.
I mean,
just kind of seemed to be a bit of a like, all right, who's hot right now? Maybe.
It does very much seem like that. I have to say, like, I was surprised. I mean, the other names that kind of came up, like Tom Cruise, that he had made a couple action films by then. Not a lot. He still was. Again, he didn't really become properly known as an action star until the 2000s. Wesley Snipes was obviously an action star, and Woody Harrelson, I guess, because they had starred in one movie. But yeah, Tom Hanks. I was like, really, Tom Hanks? I mean, like, I know he was like.
I'm just like imagining the movie. It's a broader comedy with Tom Hanks and Ellen DeGeneres.
I'm just imagining an alternative universe. Like, does that mean that Keanu would end up playing Forrest Gump? Is it?
Yeah. You just swap them out.
Yeah, it would be a weird swap. There's certain things that Tom Hanks is a great actor. There's certain things you can't really do. You can't really. He's not really great at playing villains. And I can't imagine him as an action star at all.
Yeah, and it feels like if he was going to have done it, it would have been around this sort of period.
I absolutely guess so. Yeah, and I think I think that's kind of it for like the alternative cast. Oh, there was a number of kind of directorial kind of changes as well. Not changes, because it was offered to a number of people. So apparently it was offered to John McTiernan, who was the original person it was offered to, and it was also offered to Quentin Tarantino. So that was, imagine if Speed had been his follow-up to Reservoir Dogs. That's kind of I guess it would have been a very different movie. And also,
it's a very different career if he accepts that as well, I think.
Yeah, because then I guess then he become like more of like a kind of, kind of Hollywood guy, I guess. Like, maybe not directing his kind of auteur projects, but just kind of directing blockbusters. Or maybe he would later go on to direct this kind of Pulp Fiction or whatever. It would have been a very different career trajectory. And it is interesting because I don't think you watch Reservoir Dogs and then think. I mean, some of the other directors it was offered to.
Get this guy an action movie.
Yeah. So it was offered to John McTiernan, which makes sense. He directed Die Hard.
Makes sense.
And it was also offered to Rennie Harlin. And it's like, okay.
Makes perfect sense.
Make Cliffhanger and Die Hard 2. And, fair enough. Yeah. But Tarantino? Yeah. That was a bit weird, but.
Am I right in thinking Michael? So I read as well that Michael Bay wanted to make this movie, which you can picture.
Yes.
I don't know how different it is, but like I can picture it.
I can also picture it. I guess there'd be certain shots there. I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure because, like, I guess the Michael Bay style didn't really become truly the Michael Bay style until a couple of movies in his career. So I'm not sure how it'd be. My thought is that Jan de Bont seems like a kind of fun filmmaker. I mean, he's he's made some bad movies, but like he seems to have quite a light sensibility. So I just feel like with either Bay or Harlan, the actual kind of shape of the movie might not change, but the tone of the movie might be a bit more.
Yeah, it might be again. Yeah, going to what we were saying as to it maybe might not be quite so clean cut.
Yes, that's my thought. Yeah,
because you're right. Because like the time I watched this again for ahead of this podcast, I watched it with the Bont's audio commentary, and he does speak a lot about like trying to make things feel as real as they can within this kind of outrageous situation, from like just little interactions that Jack and Annie had, and even down to like making sure that the cast of characters that are on the bus represent the multicultural nature of LA. And just like little kind of aware touches like this, and even to the point of being very considerate during the shoot of both building a safe set. I mean, this guy's, as you said, he's shot Die Hard, Hunt for Red October, loads of Verhoeven movies, both in the Netherlands and in Hollywood. He's a guy who knows his way around a film set and how to construct a film set that makes these sort of high risk setups safe, and clearly knows how to point and shoot these things as well. Because like even his bad films still have a good sense of geography and a good sense of heft to them. But like even reading around the fact that like River Phoenix died whilst they were shooting this, and Keanu Reeves was very close friends with River Phoenix, and then the Bond taking it upon himself to rework the schedule so that they could give Keanu that time and space to deal with that grief, is that like just speaks to, and it's something that unfortunately didn't seem to quite reflect in his next movie, Twister. More on that in that Ramblin episode, because that seems like quite a chaotic set. But like the sense coming out of the gate for this movie with that kind of approach and care, and I think seeks into the movie itself as well. It just feels controlled. It feels in a way that you just feel like you're in a really good pair of hands from very early on in the movie.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. And I think that, like, in a sense, like, it is interesting, that kind of clean cut vibe. I think, particularly we're in '94, Tarantino's about to get huge with Pulp Fiction. We are, kind of in the height of like the kind of Gen X kind of glibness, and it is interesting to see this action movie and like just how kind of earnest it is,
Yeah, it's played very earnestly. And it's lovely to see it make over $300 billion at the same time.
That is true. I mean, like, I don't think the 20th Century Fox initially realized like what a big hit they had, and obviously it's made for a relatively small sum for a large scale summer action blockbuster. So it's pretty amazing.
I do love a little story, like I think it was the bus jump that the first time they did it, it didn't go well, and they didn't have this scheduling time or like the money to redo it. But I think they just lied to Fox and said, "Yeah, we got it," and then just quietly did it another day with extra money that they were that Fox thought was going towards other sequences. And even then, I think the second time they did it, the bus flew much further than they thought it was going to, and it smashed one of the cameras that was in position for a setup. Thankfully, they had more than one camera.
One of the other, yeah. So yeah, that's the way I read it as well. The first time it didn't go right, it didn't go far enough, and then the second time it went way further than they expected.
Like, oh no!
And it does seem incredibly lucky that like they obviously had another camera position set up somewhere else that could still film it, but the camera they wanted to film it got crushed by the bus.
I mean, that's surely a great shot. Just this bus coming down.
Yeah. I can only imagine, Jan de Bont, as a director of photography of himself, must have been just really upset seeing a very expensive camera being flattened by a bus. And I think, like, talking on that, I mean, reading about that is really insane. Like how they pulled off that stunt, and the stuntmen. I mean, like stuntmen are crazy people. like the things they do for like movies and how they set
God
it up.
love 'em.
Like they took everything out of the bus, they tore out all the seats. It was just a kind of empty shell, and then they had to put the stuntman on a wire sitting just above the seat because if he was actually sitting on the seat, it could like crush his spine. So like kind of floating in kind of midair, and then holding on to the wheel, and then they do the jump, and I just think like that's wild. Imagine putting
Yeah.
yourself in that situation. I was just going to be strapped in this arm. I could still break my spine, but we'll just...
Let's give it a go. What, we did get it that time?
Take two. Oh,
hook me up again.
Yeah.
Oh.
Oh dear. Oh dear.
Even kind of speaking on that sequence, even of itself, this another thing that I think holds a lot of the charm for Speed for me is it comes in this pocket in the early 90s where we're not fully committed to CGI yet. There's still a lot of practical stunts, but also a lot of miniature work, models, matte paintings, all these kind of old school techniques, which I do just love seeing, particularly in action movies. And this is one of those kind of perfect blends of like miniatures and compositions of that kind of early 90s action movie that just makes everything feel more grounded and more like thrilling and more tactile. And it's something, there's something to be said for movies that kind of still dedicate themselves to the art of the miniature, I think, particularly.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And I think like there's that thing of like the people still weren't sure about the technology and stuff like that. I think like there is like this kind of, because we're in 94, so we're post Jurassic Park. So people are like interested in special effects, but they're still like, no,
Yeah.
not quite sure. So I think like you still get like another couple of years. For me, I think like in terms of action cinema, I guess, I think I always view the dividing line as Independence Day. Once you get post Independence Day, that's when we get saturated with CGI effects, and everybody wants to try out CGI effects. But before that, I think like we're still doing mainly practical, apart from the odd spectacle like Jurassic Park and stuff.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, and like even down to like it's the sort of thing where I'm like, yeah, of course that must have been a miniature, but like just hearing Jan de Bont on the director's commentary be like, the title sequence in the elevator shaft is like, so this is a miniature that was shot horizontal, and I was like, oh yeah, of course that's a miniature. Of course they're not in an elevator shaft just moving slowly down so they can fit the title sequence in. It's one of those things like I didn't really ever think about it until I heard Jan de Bont go, so this is a miniature.
Yeah, it does make sense. I did like I remember writing in my notes like where I was watching the credits. I was like, how many floors is this? This feels like a lot of it's like a big building.
Our name's coming up here. There's like a gap in between each name as well.
Yeah. Absolutely. So I was like, this is a lot of floors. But yeah, I guess that I should maybe this is a problem of like the podcast, like the way we used to do the podcast is we go through the plot kind of beat for beat, kind of almost. So there was, because of that, we described the whole movie from beginning to end, so there was no need for a plot synopsis. But now, because we do it in a more loose format, there is more of a need for a plot synopsis. So this seems like the perfect time halfway through the episode to give a little bit give a little bit of a plot synopsis. So yes, we do open with this this elevator sequence. We get the arrival of our heroes, Jack and his partner Harry, and then basically we have this bomber, Howard, played by Dennis Hopper, and it's a very simple setup. Basically, in this opening sequence, basically Jack and Harry fuck up Howard's plan. Howard runs away, presumed dead, but he's not dead. He's actually still alive, and he places a couple of bombs on a couple of buses. One of the buses he blows up, and then he phones Jack on a on a phone box, and Jack psychically knows that the call is for him. And then he tells them that there is a bomb on another bus, and once that bus hits 50 miles an hour, the bomb will become armed. And then from that point, once the bomb is armed, the bus cannot go under 50 miles an hour, or the bomb will go off. And then most of the rest of the movie is we're just on the bus trying to not let this bomb go off. There is we can talk about the final subway section later, but that's the main plot of the movie. So it's very streamlined. There's not many complications. It really is just about a bomb on a bus for the most part.
Little bookend other location action scenes just to beef it up a little bit.
Also, I just talking about that opening sequence, it's a while since I rewatched Speed, so I was like, so certain things that came back into mind. I was like, oh, I remember that. I love, because it's so peak 90s action cinema. This is such a kind of 90s action thing. I love the introduction of Jack and Harry's characters, where they the car just does that little jump, as they skid to the crime scene. I was like,
speed.
I was like, oh, that's some quality. So, and it's the kind of thing that, cause it's cheesy, I think, nowadays would be played ironically, but it's played completely straight face, which is kind of hilarious, but also kind of awesome.
I love it. Yeah, I love it. Even to the point, I'm not sure you would get this so much now in modern action movies, where the first 2-3 minutes are dedicated to a long miniature shot for a title sequence where the composer gets to put out the suite with the main themes in, and to give you a little amuse-bouche of the kind of tone that we're about to get. And I love Mark Mancini's score on this. I've been literally all week since I've rewatched it, I've just been going around a house or going about doing anything, and just been going do really amusing myself like that. But I just think I don't think many action movies would have had the patience to tone set like that in the modern era. I may be selling some a bit short, but I can't think of too many action movies that have that kind of extended opening credit sequence these days.
No, I don't know. There's not many. I guess in general, there's not many movies who do kind of opening title sequences that are long, long opening title sequences. Quite often it's just you get a title card, and then we're into the movie, and then all the credits are at the end.
There's something to be said for the tone setting opening credits.
It's true. It's something you very rarely get now. It's always a surprise to me if we get kind of opening credits. Always kind of
outside of a Bond movie, or a very elaborately designed title sequence.
Something like that. I guess because you're kind of primed for them in a Bond movie, it's less surprising. But outside of something like that, is very, very surprising. But how did you? I think the thing about this movie is in some ways it's not an amazing movie in the sense of the plot is thin, and
it's not a great amount of thematic concern, really.
There's not really thematic concern. And I think beyond, we'll talk about Dennis Hopper's performance, but beyond the kind of central three characters like Jack, Annie, and our antagonist Howard, the characters are pretty thin. There's not a lot of really memorable characters. Some have kind of little memorable moments, but it's not a kind of because like comparing this to say like Point Break, I feel like Point Break's a kind of a character is a film I love because of its kind of filled with kind of interesting and kind of kooky characters, whether it's like
Yeah.
his partner played Gary Busey, or the kind of asshole FBI guy played by John C. McGinley, or like
dumb and full of cum.
yeah, exactly. It's just kind of full of kind of like those kind of characters where I feel like that a lot of the characters here are pretty flat. But in the end, it kind of all doesn't matter because the film is so goddamn suspenseful and the action set pieces are done so goddamn well that you just kind of don't care. You're like, yeah. Well.
And I think like there's something to be said for the script development of this that Joss Whedon's brought in to largely do dialogue polish but for all reports seem to point that way. Yeah. But like Graham Yoss's script must have just been airtight when it comes to the actual sequences planned out within it. Because the thing that always strikes me with Speed, like you say, it isn't really the characters or the dialogue, despite there being some fun banter, particularly between that, like running, like that kind of the iconic dialogue that you lift from Speed is that line. Really, I think if you're going to point to any line that sticks out, but what is the thing that really stands out every time is just how well the action sequences are placed, how well they're paced out between each other, and how well they escalate, particularly when we are in this middle section where we're on the bus. Because you've got to go from initial bus explodes, find out what the bus is, get on that bus, establish yourself as the cop, deal with the tensions that then brings up, deal with the fact that your driver then gets shot, get a new driver, then deal with the fact that you have to get off the freeway because it's hard to maintain the speed, then have to deal with the fact that there's a bridge out, then have to deal with the fact that you accidentally stab a gas tank, and then have to deal with the fact that you're going to run out of petrol and have to get everyone off and trick the guy who's watching you somehow. And it, like all of these events all work as like little, and this is like always the key, I think, for any great action movie and any great action sequence. In any action movie, or even like anything that's trying to build a set piece, each set piece within itself has to tell a mini contained 3-act story of like incident leads to problem, leads to resolution, and the way that this lines them all up and like lets the dominoes fall, and the escalation of worries for Jack as he's trying to keep his cool and things just keep going wrong on this bus is so perfectly timed and paced in this movie. And I it's just too good to kind of like ever feel like you're. I always feel like I'm not giving Speed enough credit sometimes, just because what it's seemingly doing on the surface, like you say, with not having that many like big standout characters or big things to say, it can feel like you're like writing it off a little bit, but it's just so damn good at being a great blockbuster popcorn flick.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree that like, and each of the set pieces worked, and like everything just in terms of the direction and the cinematography and the way the stunts are done and second unit stuff just seems like everybody was absolutely on top of their game. And like it's hard, like it's one of those things that I think people like underestimate, like how hard it is to like create like good suspense. Like there's a lot of other movies that you could have done the exact same thing where where we get like, for example, certain scenes where we're just like watching a speedometer, and because of the way it's filmed, because of the music, because of everything, like that's really kind of heart racing and suspenseful. In another movie, that might fall completely flat. So I do think it is a kind of like underestimated filmmaking skill, kind of creating tension and suspense.
So it's a high wire act that this film does better than I think most films do. And I think it's like telling that it got nominated for an Oscar for editing, because it is just it's just so finely tuned, particularly when it comes to that, and making sure that these sequences flow and that you do get these little moments to catch your breath, settle in with some characters for a little bit, like have this kind of flirtatious chemistry emerge between Jack and Annie, all the while having Jeff Daniels kind of side plot that lets you introduces a bit of a mystery element that does act as the kind of catch your breath moments outside of the bus as Harry's trying to piece together just who Dennis Hopper's character is. Also, a great Jeff Daniels performance, and again another another side of the coin for him in not only in 1994 doing this role and then Dumb and Dumber, but also just for him, this is such an interesting role to take, because he like emerged as the comedy drama guy who works with like Mike Nichols and Woody Allen and Jonathan Demme. He's not a guy that you would immediately pinpoint to be in an action movie. And again, it's just smart casting where you have these very good actors come in for roles that, like, on paper, there's not a lot there, but because they're as good as they are, they can imbue them with a sense of personality. And particularly in the case of Jeff Daniels as Harry, builds in a nice weariness.
He does. Like, the only thing I find slightly unfortunate about that character is that, like, in terms of his like subplot where he's trying to find out who Howard is, it's interesting enough, but like I just feel like the character gets less interesting in that subplot than in the initial scene. Like, because Jeff Daniels and Keanu Reeves have like really good chemistry. And
they're really fun together, yeah.
And and like I feel it's almost a shame that they have to split them up, because I feel like the character is less fun removed from that kind of partnership. And like, you know, Keanu's the kind of gut instinct hothead one, he's like the kind of weary one that's like, oh god, you got to grow up kind of thing. And I think that really works. And then I mean, like you know, Jeff Daniels still puts in a great performance, and Harry's still like an okay character, but I feel like taken away from that chemistry, it's just not as good.
Yeah, I do get that. A couple of Jeff Daniel moment highlights. I love that little bit where he's winching Keanu down the elevator shaft, and he's like, I can't believe I'm doing this. He's like, hey, don't sweat it. In another 30 years, you'll get a small pension and a nice cheap watch. And then Keanu just goes, cool. And like one of the like images that is burned into my mind is just his Jeff Daniels poor face when he just has that daunting realization that he's like, well, I'm screwed here. I'm being blown to pieces here. I'm done. The camera just holds on his face. It's such a sad but like very very well performed beat from Daniels, who is just an actor who's just got such a good face.
He is an actor who's got such a good, and like I can't think of many scenes to kind of rival that in terms of like the kind of, oh fuck, I'm about to die face. I think like the other one that's kind of burnt into my brain is like Brad Pitt in Burn After Reading, like when he's like, he's just in that closet, and like he's just like
that big gun. Oh, absolutely.
Listeners, if you can think of any better, oh fuck, I'm about to die faces in movies, feel free. Please.
Tom Cruise is like, despite the fact that he never dies, he has a very good face in like particularly the Mission Impossible movies where something's about to possibly kill him. He's got a good wide-eyed, oh shit sort of face.
yeah, you're right. He does have a good face. So I guess like in terms of performances, the only other performance we've not really talked about much is Dennis Hopper. And the one thing I was going to say about Dennis Hopper, right, was I misremembered this performance. I don't know about you. Maybe you remembered it correctly, but I just misremembered it. In the
In what
sense,
way?
so I think because like last year on the podcast we covered Super Mario Brothers, and like
Yes.
and so that performance was fresh in my mind, and like I always remember his performance in Waterworld as well. So like I have like this very kind of idea of Dennis Hopper in the 90s. It's just like
high key villainy.
just like just off the chain insane performances. And I was like, oh, like this is kind of crazy, but it's pretty grounded as well. Like this is like
Yeah.
this is kind of like a real life crazy guy, not like a kind of movie villain crazy guy.
Yeah. Particularly relatively to coming off the back of this.
I mean, like, yeah, I mean, coming, just the year before this, he does Super Mario Brothers. The year after this, he does Waterworld, and those performances are fucking mental. He is not chewing scenery; he is devouring scenery. There is no scenery. All the scenery is gone.
I do get what you mean, because he's had this reputation as being like a high energy wild card actor since he first emerged in the 60s. And you're right, like in that kind of body of work, this on paper looks like he's going to be doing that kind of pantomime villainy thing again. And whilst he does have that kind of his lines are always like, "Hey Jack," and he's always like drawing it out, and he's like feels like he is hamming it up still to a delightful degree. But you're right, and like again, the kind of like what we discover of his character being an ex-cop who's pissed off at the system for kind of like chewing him up and spitting him out and saying thanks, see you later, have a gold watch. Is and like I'm right in thinking it's showing that he's clearly been injured on the job.
Oh yes, so that's how he gets like medically discharged from the police, because like he was like a bomb disposal guy, but one of the things one of the obviously bomb disposal things that he did like blew off one of his fingers. He like
he's got that glove
or whatever
on his hand, doesn't he?
Yeah. So it like so he got a ceremony and a gold watch and all that, but he couldn't continue being a bomb disposal guy because blew off on his fingers. So yeah,
because it's like he's not like a villain that's kind of on your kind of calibers of like say like to just point to, seeing as we're in that territory of with the Bond's involvement in it as well, like Hans Gruber in Die Hard. He's not like this. One, his name's not as like kind of memorable, it'll sticks in your mind, because like when I saw like Howard Payne, I was like, yeah, sure, that probably is his name. You could have told me another name and I would have believed you. And his motivation and it is ultimately not something that's really that interesting in the grand scheme of the concept at the center of it, but it's he's a fun who's always going to bring something to a role that is even as silly as who is he in Super Mario? Is it Koopa Trooper or the King of the Koopas?
King Koopa, yes, that's right. But like, yeah, I just like I say, I just imagined it was going to be one of those performances, like because there's other films we talked about on this podcast before where the villain performances is really kind of really out there, like Tommy Lee Jones in Under Siege or John Malkovich in Con Air, like I like that's the kind of tenor of performance that I had kind of remembered in my mind, and I was like, oh, it's not. It's it's got a pantomime streak in it, sure, but like it's not Cyrus the Virus. It's not. I can't remember Tommy Lee Jones's character name in Under Siege, but I've seen that movie so many times.
Neither can I know. Think of it. But you are right, because like and again, I don't know if it's just playing to the Bont's interest in trying to keep this as like where you can keep it a bit more grounded, keep it a bit more grounded in areas of performance and character. Whether that's kind of like he's tempering him down a little bit, I don't know. But because I imagine Hopper's not like particularly in his heyday being the easiest actor to rein in when they're going off the leash, but he seems to have a good level of understanding of what's being asked of him for this role, and he does bring it. He is fun, if not the most memorable element really of this movie for me at all.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. It's interesting what you say there about the like Hopper's performance and her not necessarily being the most memorable thing from this movie, because I think that the more I think about it, the more I think that like Speed is what is in the kind of category of action film that I would call a pure action film. So like other films like that would be like things like Hard Boiled or The Raid or Mad Max Fury Road, where the plot and the characters are kind of somewhat to the side of the point. You know, it's they're not really the point. We're just, the plot is there to get us from action set piece to the next action set piece. That's really what we're all about, and that is the engine of the movie. And you know, and that's kind of and that's where all the kind of main enjoyment for. So like, yeah, I don't really. I mean, apart from the kind of pop quiz hot shot, like you mentioned that line kind of being the most famous from the script. The things I remember from this movie aren't really characters, aren't really lines of dialogue. It's the car jump at the start. It is the Keanu getting down to the elevator. It is the the baby the baby carriage.
The pram full of cans.
The pram full of cans. It is the bus jump. It's these things that really stand out in my mind and is what I remember about the movie. And all the kind of character beats and dialogue beats and stuff like that. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that line. I remember, rewatching it, but none of that was really in my head before the rewatch.
They're very functional, and I mean that in as positive a way as I can, because I know that might sound like a bit of a saying it's a bit of a flaw, but I don't think it is. I think, because you're right, I think this film just understands that it is that kind of pure actioner. So it just needs to be able to do enough within the characters that they've got. And part of it, again, comes down to good casting and good chemistry to bring a bit more color to those characters that isn't necessarily there on the page. And I think, like, again, to your point, this comes out around this time that so many action movies seem to be kind of following the mold of Die Hard in a Die Hard on a what have you. And for all intents and purposes, that's very much what Fox kind of was interested in that script for, and clearly attaching the likes of John McTiernan and then Jan de Bont has Die Hard very much in mind with this kind of action movie. And you can see how in other hands or in other circumstances and other decisions made or one thing changed here and there, this does just kind of could easily fall short and kind of just land in that kind of category of action movies from particularly this period in the 90s that do try to copy the Die Hard template and just flounder or don't really hit and just get kind of lost to the back of video stores and don't really have any kind of cultural following or cultural landing. But this is one of those ones that just everything clicked in the right place for it. And it's hard to describe beyond like saying these sequences are clearly very well thought out, very well executed. It's hard to exactly say why this is better than say like even something like, I know, Under Siege 2 or even Speed 2.
I guess I mean I absolutely agree with what you're saying there. It is easier to describe like on a podcast if something has a great plot or something has
Yeah.
great characters or if something has great dialogue. I think the language for that is easier than like trying to describe visuals. And I think like you say, the in a way we end up kind of slightly underrating or sounding like we're underrating Speed because we're knowing that it doesn't it isn't strong in those elements, but it is so strong in its its editing, its cinematography, its tension building,
Yep.
its stunts, its action set pieces, that none of that really matters. But yeah, beyond saying that stuff is good, it's hard to kind of find the language to describe like just how it works and why it works, and other than just saying like you just need to watch it, and
Yeah.
it
And you'll
is
get it.
and you'll get it you'll be on the edge of your couch, your heart will be pounding, and it just works because it's just expertly made and it just works. But you really need to experience it yourself to understand how it works, beyond us trying to describe it. And the other thing that I thought was fascinating when doing the research, when you were talking about the kind of Die Hard stuff, and obviously yes, 20th Century Fox were looking for kind of a Die Hard knockoff, and I thought it was fascinating that Joss Whedon in his dialogue did the opposite of what you would imagine Joss Whedon did. Because apparently the original script was much closer in kind of tone to Die Hard, and the script was much more quippy and much more like your kind of typical action film of the time. And of course, Whedon is known for kind of ironic, quippy dialogue, and he actually removed much of the quippy dialogue and replaced it with other dialogue, although keeping some kind of quips like the pop quiz hot shot and stuff like that. So it's funny how like sometimes people just don't act in the way you would guess that they would.
Yeah. And I think that I wonder how much of that comes down to tailoring it to someone like Keanu Reeves, who maybe not necessarily is quite as adept at delivering those kind of quips and off the cuff sort of one-liners that you might expect from your kind of jaded New York sensibility Bruce Willis to come out with. There's some kind of some hangover of it in some elements. I like just think it's a very silly line, and I think the closest that this film kind of comes to that sort of thing is the bit at the end.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, well, the fight on the top of the train ends with spoilers, but so we've got this ends with Dennis Hopper getting just decapitated, and just Jack coming out with, "Yeah, well, I'm taller."
I do that is an interesting point you make. I do wonder if that's true, because like that's not like Keanu can kind of do one-liners, but he is naturally a more I think we use the word earnest quite a lot, but he is naturally more earnest performer.
I just think his best one-line is always when he's a bit exasperated. So even like thinking like the John Wick ones where he's like, "Yeah, I'm thinking I'm back," is when he's like at the end of his tether.
Yeah, he doesn't have that. He's not good. He's not like a Bruce Willis. He's not good with zingers. And like I think like it's good to know like what some performers are better at one thing than another. I think like the movie that I always think of like people who are natural with kind of zingers and people who are not is Tango and Cash, where like Kurt Russell is an absolute natural with zingers.
Oh yeah.
He can do one-liners all day. And Stallone God love him. He's good. Again, he's a more
Rambo is a pussy.
But again, he's a more earnest performer. He doesn't suit sarcasm and kind of, quick fire lines. It's not him. So he looks lost at sea. Like Kurt Russell really does run circles around him in that movie.
He really does.
Yeah. Stallone shouldn't have picked that film, or they should have written it differently.
Yeah. What a wild movie that is.
That's a movie that has a crazy production history. It's a really wild film. But I guess, going back to Speed, we talked a lot about the action being the best thing. Like, what were your favorite action moments? Was it the bus jump? What was the things that you're like, yeah, I always remember that. That's burned into my brain.
I really love the sequence where he's trying to find the bus and get on the bus and steals that guy's Jag. I think it's Glenn Plummer's the actor who.
Yeah, that's Glenn Plummer.
For whatever reason, turns up in Speed 2 as well. Just that being out on that freeway is where it feels at its most dangerous. Where and it's where he's trying to catch the bus before it goes over 50 and is on the bomb and is trying his best to get there, but then we know that it's already gone over 50, and then they get there and it's like trying to keep the bus at 50 whilst also trying to jump on it. And that one of the purely thrilling moments of an action beat in this is when Keanu makes that jump and he doesn't quite make it and his feet kind of skid on the road, and before he pulls himself in, it's that kind of that's some hair-raising stuff as he's trying to do that at what looks like really high speeds on an actual freeway. That sort of stuff is what gets your blood pumping with something like this. And then even to the point of when we get to the airport runway and he has to go under to try and get a good look at the bomb. That I think is a very good sequence that levels up nicely. And again, it has these little pockets of jeopardy and then trying to solve it. And I like the way everyone on the bus comes together to pull him back up. Just all little contained beats like that. The strongest stretch, I think, is definitely these sequences contained on the bus. And I do understand why they would have to take it away from the bus, but I do think it probably ends on the weakest action scene with the subway fight, just because I don't fully believe that Dennis Hopper's going to hold his own much in a fight against Keanu Reeves, be it on top of a train or not.
Yeah, I struggle to believe it. I think the stuff on the bus is absolutely the strongest, but I think the stuff after the bus, where we get to the subway and stuff, there's just a number of things where it's just why there's a number of questions there. Why take Annie to the drop off?
Yeah, why is Annie hanging out?
why is Annie there at all? And then I guess there's a couple of instances of kind of plot convenience theater where when they do the kind of video loop of the CCTV camera, it just so happens at that moment Hopper is in the loo, and then apparently
I love the little happy accidents like that. Love that. Phew.
Yes. Oh, glad we got away with that one. And then apparently he doesn't notice that for ages, right up until the moment where he does notice it, just at the last second, just as he's going to the drop off, which again is it's very convenient.
Yeah. I do love the fact that the drop off manages to work because he drilled a massive hole under a bin.
It's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing.
And no one on this unit thought to check. Should we check whether the bin's okay?
That's what my first thought was as well. When Keanu knocks over the bin, there's just this massive hole's being drilled into it.
It was like,
and nobody
did you not notice that?
When you put this big bag of cash in the bin, and it didn't
It's like,
there was no like,
thud.
There was no thud at the bottom. You know, it just kind of went in, and there was no noise.
That guy really messed up that day when he was like, "Oh, I didn't hear it drop. I'm sure it's fine." First day on the job. I've got one job to do. Just drop the bag and go.
Also, at this point, we know who Howard is. Obviously, the his photograph would have been given to other police officers. The whole thing is covered in, the whole area is covered in snipers, and yet nobody sees him as nobody spots him. He's not wearing a mask or even any sunglasses or anything, not hiding his appearance at all. He's just wearing a cop uniform, and he is immediately blended in, apparently, despite the fact that, like, everybody would have been distributed his picture, presumably. I guess.
Yeah.
There's many
it
plot
does
holes
feel
in
like,
the finale.
Yeah. And it does feel like that sort of sequence where, and by all accounts it was, someone's come in at the script level and gone like, we need to get away from the bus by the end. We can't just keep it on the bus the whole time. And I understand the need for it in that way. So kind of like, and I do think it, like, as the structure of the film, I think it flows very nicely, having these kind of two bookend action sequences that don't take place in the main heart of the concept, and do kind of let you have a big kiss at the end. You can always, I don't mind it if it helps lead to a big kiss at the end on a subway cart in the middle of Hollywood Boulevard. That's okay by me. That's movies.
Yeah. But that was an interesting thing as well, because when I was watching it, and we get the big kiss at the end, and the kind of Keanu's call
so much
back.
glass is falling on them.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, we talk about things that might not happen now. Just like often we wouldn't get like a long opening title sequence now. I feel like we wouldn't get this ending now. Like, a lot of 90s films like end like this. They just end. Usually, like,
just a crowd gathering around an incident, and then the camera pulling back and the credits start to roll over the Guns N' Roses track. That tends to be how we end.
Exactly. Whereas now it feels like, there would have been like a postscript of like the captain would have come across something. It would have been like a final kind of like another kind of like 5-10 minutes of just chat of like, oh well, we did a good job. Like sometimes there's kind of unnecessary kind of postscripts, whereas like often films in the 90s just kind of end, and like you say, and then we cut to a rock song. And the funny thing about the rock song that ends this movie is, as much as we were talking about how Speed, kind of was really the end of like the Schwarzenegger-Stallone era. It's pointing the way to the future of the action movie. Despite that, the end theme, which is also called Speed, is done
Billy
by
Idol.
it's done by Billy Idol, with his last charting single in the UK came in at number 47, and he never had a charting single again. Like, really at the tail end of his career. Like,
we're going out on Speed. I can't really remember anything about that song. I will be honest.
No, it's
not one that stuck in my mind.
It's not a classic. It's not a classic. It's not White Wedding or anything.
I've just looked at NME described it as an appropriately silly song.
Yeah, I remember being an appropriately silly song.
A great theme for a bloke who keeps coming off his bike.
That's
oh, that's great.
That's highly appropriate. But yes, I do. I love this kind of period of action movie, because it's kind of changes after this. Like after like 94, we don't get the kind of crowd gathering or somebody being loaded up into the back of an ambulance and then cut to whatever hard rock song. I think like once we get into kind of 95, things kind of change a bit, and there's a bit more differentiate.
A bit more postscript.
Yeah, there's a bit more postscript, and also we there's not as many kind of hard rock themes for action movies in the kind of mid to late 90s. I guess we kind of vary it up a bit. A mixture of kind of like they get into more metal and also like more hip hop, I guess, as well.
Yeah,
So-
absolutely. Or Jamiroquai.
Yes, Jamiroquai. And oh, man. Like this is a totally random side note, but just you talking about Jamiroquai, and obviously they did the song for like Godzilla. One
Yes.
of, that came out obviously in 1998, and I was born in 1985. In the summer of 98, it was just before I was 13. I was, now being allowed to go to the cinema myself. It was a bus trip.
Godzilla fever.
Yeah, it was a bus trip that was like took about half an hour. So I was now of the age that I was allowed to do this myself. And so I went to see a lot of movies with my friends in the summer of 98, which is one of the worst summers ever. We had Godzilla, Lost in Space, Avengers,
Oh,
Armageddon.
Christ.
It's like just a clusterfuck of what a summer.
What? It's Lethal Weapon 4 that summer as well.
Yes, Lethal Weapon 4. Like,
Yeah.
I was like, well, this is
I watched it. That's a film that Yanderbomb was supposed to do, Godzilla. But
That's right. They went
And,
with Roland Emmerich instead.
indeed. Not to potentially spoil a future episode of All 90s Action All the Time, but do you have any strong feelings on Speed 2 Cruise Control? Because I did rewatch it this week for the first time, I think, since I first saw it on video, not long after I first saw the first Speed. So like when I was like 10 or 11.
Okay.
So it had been a long time, but I'm intrigued if you have any particular strong feelings on it.
I don't have any particular strong feelings, but I've not like I even I remember it being bad when I first so I don't even know. I've seen like bits and pieces of it since it first came out, but I think I've only seen it as in its entirety once, and that's when I rented it. In again the year of 1998.
Yeah, I think I would have rented it then.
So I'd be depending on when I rented it. I don't know. Like I might have been 13 at the time. And yeah, I remember. And obviously, when you're that age, you enjoy most things. You might look back now and be like, oh, when I was like 12, 13. Those movies were actually terrible, and I thought they were fun. But even I recognized, even I was like, watching it, being like,
something's not right here.
This is not good. So like, yeah, and like my, if like somebody of my age then, of around 12, 13. Can also note the thing that everybody else notes of, this is a movie called Speed, and it's on a cruise ship, the slowest mode of transport in the world. Yeah, and also like just everything is bad in that movie. Well, I mean, the way I remember it is everything beyond like Willem Dafoe being fun and Sandra Bullock trying her absolute damnedest to make something out of this.
Yeah, trying to conjure. Come on, Jason Patrick, give me something.
Like Jason Patrick is so wooden in that movie. Like,
yeah,
he's terrible. Like, kind of everything is terrible. Everything.
I couldn't stop looking at his hairline when I was watching it the other day. It's the weirdest hairline.
Yeah,
he's not quite the say, because I was somewhat surprised by how much I didn't think it was an entirely awful, worthless enterprise, because I had it in my head that was like if like Speed to me is a 5-star cold hard action classic, I had in my head Speed 2 is a 1-star turkey. It wasn't that bad. It's a 2-star turkey. Again, just because it comes down to, I think, Jan de Bont just being the kind of filmmaker that just isn't going to shoot something badly for the most part. And like there's stuff on that cruise ship where it gets like quite claustrophobic, and just the geography of it is still very well mapped out. I think just like, as we're speaking to how hard it is to really describe just exactly what it is that Speed does right in terms of its pacing and leveling up of action. You just need to look at something like Speed 2 to be like, oh, this is how you kind of don't do that, because all the sequences contained within it, where they're placed are kind of patchy. There's long stretches where nothing's really happening, and when there are sequences, they're not that exciting. It just amounts to turning a wheel under a bit of water and coming back up for some air and then going back down and turning the wheel again. That's like the extent of some of those action sequences in that movie, where it's just like, this just is not very, on a very like design level, this just isn't that thrilling. Which again just comes down to we're moving it to a boat. But they're interesting counterparts, particularly for, I think there's a little bit of maybe hubristic kind of Bill coming due with Speed 2, I think, particularly for Jan de Bont coming off of Speed and Twister, 2 movies that were big and made a lot of money and were very popular, to then be like, he's got a story by credit, he's a producer on it, he's directing it, he's kind of really pushing the lead with Speed 2, and for it to flounder as it did, I think Imagine would have been a bit of a reality check. And unfortunately, in the case of Jan de Bont's certainly directorial career, just something he never seems to really bounce back from.
No, it seems to be, yeah, that seems to be like his real kind of downfall. It's interesting because like just kind of thinking about your latest episode you did on Men in Black 2, it's a bit like the kind of
very similar
Barry Sonnenfeld thing, where like he did, you know, a few great movies in the 2 Adam Family movies, Get Shorty, and I'm missing one. Oh, and Men in Black, the first Men in Black.
Men in Black, yeah.
And then the first Men in Black, and then Wild Wild West seems to kind of break him, and then he's never the same after.
He's really not.
Yeah, it's kind of wild, and like, yeah, on this Speed 2 Cruise Control, I'm not sure. I mean, obviously, we only do like 12 movies a year, so we might do that for the 2027, 1997, if we're still going at that.
Yeah.
But yeah, 97's like a really weird year because you get like a couple of classics like Men in Black and Air Force One, but you get some like historic duds. Speed 2 Cruise Control being one of them. Others being like Batman and Robin, Spawn. I think Double Team came out that year.
I think it's the Saint that year.
Yeah, we've already covered the because, like,
you had a Kilmer series, didn't you?
We did a Kilmer season, and the Saint is an interesting dud. It's not Spawn or like Batman and Robin, where they're just like terrible. Yeah, the Saint is it's a movie that's pulling in 2 different directions at the same time. I think that's the main problem with it. But it's
Mortal
got
Kombat Annihilation. I've just got 97 action movies.
Mortal Kombat Annihilation, again, another historic dud. You know, 97 overall, not a great year. But like I said, it does. You know, it has some good ones. It has, you know, Starship Troopers, The Fifth Element. Yeah, you know, Air Force One, you know, Men in Black. It actually, interestingly, kind of like a good year for kind of sci-fi action, you know. But but it has some absolute humdingers in terms of just terrible. but we're still in the weeds in 94, so we still got some time before we get to 97. That's another 3 years away. So we'll see if we are still going in 3 years.
See if you still
we are.
cross off Speed 2.
Oh, so yes. Do you have any final thoughts on Speed before we wrap up this episode?
I'm trying to think. We've covered a lot of like my key areas that like I would say I really wanted to kind of like sing the praises of, from like that natural chemistry between Keanu and Sandra, the weariness of Jeff Daniels, and then just the sheer skill of the leveling up and design of action sequences in here, powered by a great Mark Mancina score. So yeah, I think my final words really are just to say that this is that kind of epitome of an action movie of what you want to do. You know what buttons it's going to press, and it presses them so well. It's just so very, very astute as to what this sort of movie needs to deliver, and knows how to go about it and provide the thrills. And each time I come back to it, I'm just instantly swept up in it, from like just the leanness of it, the economy of it, and just how something so seemingly simple is constructed with so much complexity within the sequences to deliver something that feels very pure and very thrilling.
Absolutely. So that brings us to the end of our Speed episode. So it just leaves me to thank you, Andrew, for coming on, and to ask you for your kind of social media plugs or anything that's coming up that you want to promote, sing its praises. You go ahead and promote away.
Thank you, man. Thank you for having me. It's been a delight, and it's always a joy to natter about action movies, and particularly one that I love as much as I love Speed. And if you have enjoyed these ramblings, then come on by to Ramblin, an Amblin Podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow us on Twitter at Amblin, and you can follow my good self at Andy Gaudion 93 as well. I'm on Letterboxd too, if you want to keep up with everything that I'm watching on there. Just look up Andy Gaudion and you should find me easy enough. But yeah, Ramblin is wherever you get your podcasts. We're in the early noughties at the time of recording. We're just getting together our Catch Me If You Can episode, written by the co-writer of Speed 2, Cruise Control, Jeff Nathanson. So it all comes back. There's all tendrils. But we're gonna keep on going on the good ship Amblin for a good while yet. Lots of films to come. And they're still producing movies, so we've got no end in sight there. But yeah, if you want to catch up on a healthy back catalogue of the 80s and 90s movies that really made Amblin's name, then yeah, go on, check us out if you feel so inclined.
Well, I highly recommend our listeners do that. And listeners, if you want to like this up on social media, you can at All 90s Action on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it. We also have a Facebook page. You want to hit us up there. And then, yeah, remember that you can get us across kind of most podcast streaming platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all the kind of other ones. I used to often say Stitcher, but that doesn't exist anymore. So it's kind of it's annoying. It's annoying. You fucked up my outro, Stitcher.
Yeah. Yeah. Are you also still stuck in this permanent spiral? Just be like, do I say X or do I still just go Twitter?
I'm still stuck. Yes, I'm still stuck in the spiral. Yeah, like I've also got like a personal Blue Sky account. Maybe at some point the podcast will get a Blue Sky account. Who knows? But there's many ways to reach us. So just type in All 90s Action all the time. We'll pop up. You'll see where we're at. And that is all for this time. please do join us again next month when we will be talking about another major blockbuster from 1994. Yes, it's Arnold Schwarzenegger's True Lies.
Oh, yes.
Until then, though, see ya.